What's up team, Killchain here, and today we're going to be having a look at simming, so specifically using raid bots, and I fully expect to have everyone from the spectrum of 100% knows what they're doing all the way down to someone that's either never heard of it or just briefly knows it and goes, I don't want to deal with that. But the whole point is to give you guys more information of just quickly, run over how to use it, why it's useful in certain scenarios, why some aspects of it should be avoided. And obviously there's all the parentheses of, I know melee specs generally pretty well, whereas for casters and anything range, obviously use information based on your Discord. There's always class Discords, right? And things like that. So that's always very helpful there. And I might even go the extra mile and we'll have all the class Discords in the description down below. So if, for example, this is your first foray into starting to try and get better at the game, then by all means, using your class Discords is going to be very useful. So I'll hunt around and find them and have more than a Discord for every single class. It'll be a huge asset and a huge knowledge base for you guys as well. So now that being said, actually looking at raid bots, here we go. We've obviously got our home screen here. Now, most of these options we're going to run over what's useful, what's not. Now, I specifically have also waited for my paid subscription to this service to run out so I can show you the free version. The paid version will get you just faster sims, quicker queue times, and essentially more sims that you can run with different variations at one time. But first, a word from our not sponsor of the video. That's right, I'm not sponsored in any way, shape or form, although I am a part of their affiliate program with links down in the description below. But for us, NordVPN, you've seen it in other YouTube videos. I'm not silly, I'm sure you have everywhere, but it does directly help out myself. NordVPN has honestly been a massive godsend, and that's why I actually feel so comfortable being able to sort of take these first steps in terms of getting sponsorship in any way, shape or form, because actually genuinely stand by the product, right? It's been an absolute must have when it came to getting up Final Fantasy 14, for example. As you guys would know, while we do predominantly cover World of Warcraft, I pretty much will play every MMO under the sun. Whether or not I still play them is fair to be said, but I've at least got my hands dirty with every single one. And when it came to Final Fantasy 14, the Australian ISPs just have major issues with it. NordVPN helped bypass that entirely. It was amazing. Any of those issues, if you guys are sharing that same situation where you're struggling to be able to update the game or even download it in the first place, anything like that, it was just, Final Fantasy 14 just did not like our ISP with Australia. Completely avoids that issue by just, pretending you're not in Australia. It helps with content. My mother-in-law, my partner, there's many videos, TV shows, everything like that that's region locked. Certain situations, for example, Netflix. For me, back in the day, I've wanted to watch Scrubs again. Scrubs was on Netflix, but not the Australian Netflix, and I've been able to circumvent that. Helps protect you for advertising stuff. I can guarantee you, how many times have you guys typed in buy a mattress or a bed or something in Google? Once you've bought the mattress and bed, the ads don't stop. For the next month or two, you're just going to get bombarded with mattress ads constantly. I've literally had that happen. This is a personal anecdotal experience, as I'm sure you can tell, because we just got our bed, a new bed back a couple of months ago. And not only that, they obviously have more services than just the VPN. You've got your password and locker for encrypted files for your devices. You've got password to have one master password that is locally encrypted. So none of that gets sent to their servers or anything, but then it completely helps you have unique passwords for every single website. So you actually are as secure as you can be, while it is all at the control of your fingertips with your actual locally encrypted master password on your device itself. So perfect. Literally, genuinely believe in the product. Check them out below. And we'll get back to the video. These are going to be used relatively regularly, with the absolute most use coming out of Top Gear. It'll also pick up the Great Vault that you have as well. I almost forgot what it was called for a second. So even as you go to the Great Vault, there'll be footage somewhere on the screen as that as well, where you can then use that sim to plug it in, and it will show you your Great Vault options, with also the added tech of making sure that if you go, I have three slots of 421 choices and some high mythic choices in that as well. It's not just going to clearly say, oh yeah, get all of them because they are all technically the best. No, it'll be smart enough to know that you can only pick one of the Great Vault options, and it will tell you which one's the better one to go for in terms of numerical value for just raw DPS. Not as useful for tanking and healing, obviously. This is very much far superior and far more useful for your output as a DPS character. and just helping you min-max what you can get out of it from there. And it is also important to obviously go in knowing certain limitations you're going to have based on Mythic Plus or rating. There's going to be certain talent setups that might not be the best talent build in terms of raw DPS, but you still want to run that because there's certain utility that it provides. And this will give you another example where you can actually tangibly go, no, I need to run this particular build because of the utility it provides, but what can I gem and enchant for to make sure I get the most out of that particular build, if you get the idea. So with that in mind, let's jump back into the actual game, and you'll see the foray before us. We have our character, and with the Simulation Craft add-on, which you can get it from any add-on source ever, WoW Up, CurseForge, etc. Just look for Simulation Craft and typing /simc, so SIMC, brings up this lovely little thing. And as you can see, it's also completely highlighted for you. There's nothing you need to do, nothing you need to change. You just literally Control C straight away to copy it, and then we can go back to our raid bots, and suddenly you have the string to copy and paste wherever you want. Now, you can also do it from just loading up the character. So if I just had it all completely clear, and on a quick sim, for example, you can see that I could just type in the character and it will use the data from the last logout from the armory. Not really that great, honestly. I would typically always make sure you have the pasted SimC link directly from in-game, because you know that's going to be 100% accurate in all times. So we obviously have multiple different ones. You can see nicely that they've changed the stats. The reason we don't want to use that anymore because it's much more volatile. I'd much rather just quickly touch on the why we don't use this particular one. And even here, massive warning, strongly advises against using stat weights, outdated tool, blah, 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 blah. So it'll tell you exactly what your stat weights are for your exact current gear setup. And that fluctuates, obviously, right? So it might tell you haste and mastery is the best. That's awesome. And then you get a particular trinket that is quite high on haste and mastery. And then it will immediately tell you, just because of that one particular item, technically for the next 50 points of whatever secondary stat, crit's a bit more useful until you hit a new random threshold of whatever, how maths works, right? So it's constantly fluctuating. For that reason, I definitely would agree and do not use stat weights at any point. And if you find anyone that happens to be using stat weights and going, oh, well, according to my current gear setup, I'm being told that I should prioritize this stat more than the other stat. No, always use top gear for everything in all scenarios, basically. So as you can see, we've pasted in our lovely little section, and you've got some parameters that you can work with here. So most notably, your requirements for tier set. We're this so far deep into the season that I would expect most people to be having 4-piece and wanting to maintain 4-piece. But by means, early on in the season, you can require that at least 2 pieces are maintained. So perhaps you might have 3-piece at the moment and you don't know which ones to sort of swap out based on current gear levels. You can at least set those parameters for you. It also allows you to allow for Valor upgrades. So let's say you had 6,000 Valor and you weren't sure which particular item piece gets you the most bang for your buck in terms of upgrading it. You can set how much value you have there, as well as catalyst charges. So you can say, cool, I may lose 4-piece by getting this certain setup, but I at least have 2 charges that'll allow me to turn my gloves into tier piece, so I maintain 4-piece. You get the idea. And then you've got the actual items themselves, so you can swap around, you can add multiple, take some away, and it'll always yell at you if there's a certain configuration that's not going to work. Because as you can see here, it's saying that I just don't have a chest piece on. That's clearly not what we want. And really, really handy as well when it comes to things like rings and trinkets. Typically as well, like if I went to my bank, I would have so many trinkets, it's not even funny. And you can actually do that. So the Great Vault will obviously show up as well as bank. So when you have that particular showing available and you open up the bank, typing /simc will pull all that information as well, as you would have seen from the other thing. And yeah, it'll also give you all of the possible enchantments, rings, gems. You get the idea. Just across the board, everything's going to be pretty well set, and you get to dictate what you want to be comparing against each other. A couple of things to obviously really notably show is that show all enhancements is sort of irrelevant, right? Like you don't need to know ones that are completely not used for DPS in any capacity, but you could technically show all, which will show you all those weird niche healing ones like Earthen Devotion and stuff. We don't really look at that as a DPS character, for example. Your choices are going to be Sophic, Frozen, or sometimes Wafting, depending. For example, Arms Warriors, for example, will enjoy Wafting Devotion there. and you get to just sort of decide from there what you're going to do with it. So another key component that you definitely want to make sure is whether or not you choose to replace existing gems and enchants. It'll add a hell of a lot more combinations, which can be a bit tricky, as you can see the warning there. But what it will do is, regardless of whatever your current gems and enchants are, this will allow it to just completely replace it and set it as you dictate. And this is very useful to find out. I'm currently running all haste priority gems with mastery as a secondary. Then I can just at least go, regardless of what I currently have, just show me what is now the best given my current gear setup. Very useful for that reason, but takes a hell of a lot more up there. Whereas alternatively, you can untick it and basically go, whatever enchants and stuff I have on, do not touch. However, any new pieces that I'm adding, set it to be what you expect it to be. For example, if I'm trying to compare this second ring, even though I know it's obviously not as good because it's not 415 or above, but I could pick this third ring, and go, okay, let's compare this third ring with these other two, but as you can see, it's not enchanted at all. Assume then that we're not going to touch any of the previous enchants that already are on the two big rings. However, this particular ring, we're just going to add it onto mastery or haste or whatever it decides is the best. That's where you can have that section ticked off. However, if you tick it on, it'll replace absolutely everything that currently exists and then compares from there, which is exceptionally useful for things like, is now a good time to change my ring enchant or what gems I'm running, etc. And you get to decide. Obviously, I could pick literally everything, which is insane. But at a certain point, you're going to hit your maximum limitations for either the combinations available or anything like that. So you do need to be somewhat smart, and the more you pay them, ironically, it's only like a $10 subscription. But if you do pay for the premium subscription, then by all means you get quicker simulations, vastly more combinations that you can work with and stuff like that. You'll also see the talents, and not only that, you can also create your own. So if it's not a talent build that you currently have in game as a set loadout, you can still add your own custom loadout, import it directly from, let's say, Wowhead. Wowhead has some unique Aranog only or Terrace only build that isn't your typical standard rating build in anything else, and you just want to get that as an idea for a single target or whatever the case may be. You can copy it straight in and it'll just fill it in for you, and it adds all these extra layers onto it from there. Likewise, you can also copy. For example, if I want to go, this week is a week where I need to run a fear or something like that, I can copy that loadout and it will make it blah 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 version 2, and then I can, pull out 2 from there and go, okay, how much is Spear of Bastion gonna give me in terms of that, and just save it. It won't change anything in game, but I can at least compare here, for example, how much am I losing from having Thunderous Roar versus having Spear of Bastion, and you can get that comparison. So that's really handy and useful as well, and then you can delete from there. This last part is going to be also require a little bit of time sync in between it. You get certain embellishments and you can dictate stuff. For example, the blue silken linen uptime, which is your above 90% health, you gain mastery. Are you always above 90% health because you're an absolute god gamer that never gets hit by anything and your healers always keep you topped? Cool, you could set it to 100%, 80, 90, whatever health percentage you want, or whatever uptime percentage you want that you are always above 90, you get that option to toy around with. But thankfully, I don't even have this particular embellishment, so I don't need to worry about it. Likewise, with the Primal Ritual Shell, if you still have this, then you can pick which one you're running as a DPS, the Wind or the Flame. There's obviously more versions to pick from, but you typically wouldn't run the tanking or healing one as a DPS, right? Likewise, the Ruby Shell training, you can pick which one you've opted for that, as well as your Whispering Incarnate Icon. Is it just you as a DPS? Is it also as a tank or a healer? Or is it DPS and tank? Or is it all three? You get the idea. You can choose to dictate what you've got. So for example, if I'm trying to figure out the best setup for my raid, then I think at this point, all 3 roles have Whispering Incarnate Icon covered. So I could go, cool, I really want to know what my best Terrace build is. I'm going to set it to all 3, as you can see there. And then, pick my single target only build and untick the other 2, only have single target, so I can know exactly what a patchwork fight on Terrace would be. Now, in terms of the fight style, you have a lot to work with here, but typically you're going to be using either Dungeon Slice, Patchwork, and then very occasionally maybe even Hectic Ad Cleave, You could do finer things like only in execute phase for patchwork or different things like that. Another option you would have, which is very useful, is also patchwork but add 4 bosses. So that is a prime example of what you could do for Primal Council. So in that case, you've always got 4 bosses. There's no ads that pop up. It's basically just tank and spank it at that point. You're just dealing with a couple of different mechanics, but this will give you a great example of what would be the best for that. As your guild starts getting more gear and you start noticing that maybe on average your fights only last 3 minutes instead of 5 minutes, then by all means you've got that option to go, no, this particular fight is going to last only 3 minutes instead of 5. What tweaks could I make if you really wanted to go that in depth? By all means. So standard though, patchwork for 1 boss for 5 minutes is typically what you're going to be running. And outside of that though, you're also going to have the Dungeon Slice, very useful for most specs, but do keep in mind that there's certain particular specializations and classes that don't get as great benefit of it. So if you were following anything in terms of Fury, there was issues for a little bit of time there where the APL, which is the action priority list, was favoring how we used to play in 10.02, not how we play now in 10.05. And so for that reason, the Dungeon Slice will be saying, oh, you're only doing this much DPS, this other build's better. And no, it's just because your action priority list completely changed with the 10.05 build, because you want to be sinking rampages and not doing crushing blows really at all, because we don't even pick up crushing blows, they're raging blows. You get the idea. So make sure your class and your specialization does get benefit out of Dungeon Slice. Typically, that's where you'd go to your Discord. Most people in the Discord will be pretty comfortable with that. Otherwise, if Dungeon Slice doesn't quite work for you, you do have the Hectic Ad Cleave as an alternative, which basically goes, you've got a boss for however long you want, but around 40% of the time, a bunch of ads will spawn. So that gives you at least somewhat comparison to, ads and having some sort of AoE involved in that particular fight. Though typically you're always going to be using Patchwork and Dungeon Slice. So outside of that, the last final sections are obviously whatever default you've decided you can personally pick of what you're going to use. For example, most people might not be able to get quality 3 ultimate power pots yet. You might be able to set it as just normal regular power, or SimC default just picks whatever the best possible option is regardless. And even your rune weapon, if you are using Howling on both particular hands, then you've got that option. If you're someone that couldn't afford it at the beginning or whatever the case may be, and you just wanted to use AP, you really get to pick whatever weapon rune you're going to run with. So that's also very, very useful. And you can even add your Draconic Augment rune if you're someone that forks out for them, by all means, perfect. If you're not though, then you can pick whatever you want. And likewise, if you're really running static empowerment, for example, instead of just picking the standard tepid versatility, you can say, nope, I run static empowerment all the time, so I'm gonna run with that particular option. You can see you really get a lot of options to toy around with. And then finally, let's say if I wanted to go single target patchwork, 5 minutes. Terrace usually lasts only, let's say, 3 minutes now, just for the sake of argument. We'll just say 3 minutes. Cool. Let's click to open. So yeah, 3 minutes and single target build, that's fine. We want to know what gem setup I can have and what 2 ring enchants. We might even throw crit just in case as well, but I never want to deviate from Sophic Devotion because there's too many AoE fights to make it worthwhile for Frozen Devotion. And that requires you guys to sort of make up your mind from there as well, right? You can't just blindly go in and go, oh, I'm going to test everything all the time, because then your combinations is going to get too high. And as you can see, I've only got a limitation of 300,000 iterations, whereas as you start getting more and more stuff, eventually you're going to hit the red bar where you're doing too many. And that's where paying for the $10 a month can be helpful. I already know that I don't want to run Rinskar, and these 2 are the better options for me at this current time. So that's why I've gotten rid of all the trinkets that I used to carry around and just put them aside in my bank, because I've now narrowed it down to most of the typical scenarios that I'd want to run. And my gear's not really going to change at this point. It's mainly just in regards to what ring and enchants and gems and stuff should I run for single target for a fight like Terra. So at this point, then you can click the lovely Find Top Gear. So now we come to our results screen. There's the obvious what DPS that you came out with, and also on the right hand side you've got the sim details. So it'll tell you, yes, it was a patchwork fight, these are the buffs that you ran with, it was over 3 minutes, 1 boss target, etc. Just gives you a nice little reminder for everything there. And it will also tell you what ended up being the best talent build loadout based on what parameters you gave it, for example. So this is really handy for things like trying to figure out which particular AoE build might do the best in certain different scenarios, and being able to go, cool, what if I change these couple of talents or these couple of talents, and then you can compare them up against each other. Then by all means, it'll tell you what the top one is there, and it'll also highlight in yellow any significant differences based on what you're currently running. So right here, the Lariat is the issue. It's saying that I should be running the Mastery gem instead of the Haste gem for the Primalist gem that you get one of. Whereas for some reason I am running Keen Nelthorites, but it's still saying that I should really be running the Keen Nelthorites, which I am. Weird. But the whole point is highlighted in yellow are the things that it's recommending you change. And then it gives you a nice little rundown of what your current equipped gear is. And then by changing X or Y, it's swapped out to what the new threshold is, as well as how much higher compared to what your current one was. And you can click around and stuff like that. Also has additional info, so you can literally see the raw input data from that particular run again, and then the add-on data and everything like that. So that's all getting into the nitty-gritty. Another really cool feature here though is these 3 little lines you get in the top right. It'll actually show you all your previous reports. As you can see, I've done a lot, but this is very handy for being able to go, okay, now that I've got this gear, comparing this to perhaps an old Fury run sim that I did, like as you can see a few hours ago for a dungeon slice, I could then open up that previous thing and go, cool, this was for a dungeon slice over 6 minutes, this was the DPS I got, this was the build that I was running, these are the recommended changes, which as you can see here, you'll also notice the GV item, Great Vault item up in the top left, so it will tag for you all those Great Vault items to say, nope, this is the one you want, these are the changes it would recommend. So it's saying I should swap from Haste to Mastery, which I have now done, and so on and so forth. So it gives you a nice little breakdown here. Very useful, very handy, and Top Gear is what you're predominantly going to be using. Next, take a look at the Droptimizer. Now, second tab along, again, you can pull it from the Armory, not really recommended. Straight from the SimC add-on with the string will be the way to go. And as you can see, you've got a list of different sources. And just like it details here, it's basically comparing all the possible drops from a source or potential that you have through professions, etc., based on your current gear and how much it's going to add out. So if you, for example, and the reason why I've found it very, very useful for professions is, let's say you've just gotten your new spark and you're like, yay, cool, a spark randomly dropped from wherever the hell a spark would drop from. And you're like, okay, what can I actually use this spark for? What am I going to get the most bang for my buck? So again, you can specifically craft and make sure you're tailoring the right secondary stats you're going to want. So typically for a Fury Rogue, for example, we're going to want Haste and Mastery. We're talking 418 because I've got plenty of concentrated primal infusions. And I'll make sure I can craft it at the maximum possible amount. If there's a gem slot, then by all means, pick what gem slot you'd rather pick. And then it will go right through and go, okay, well, from all these possible professions that you could have and to use a spark for, let's run it and let's figure out what exactly is going to be our best. So as you can see, it's a Droptimizer specifically for professions, only epic quality, using the Primal Infusion rank 5 quality. And it's just going to go, here's all the possible items, and it's going to actually segregate them out into which one is going to give us the most gain given our current gear. So let's wait for that to roll down and then we'll check out the results. Basing it off our professions, because we specifically did professions obviously, and it's based around a 3-minute patchwork again, roughly what most of the bosses will sit at. Where are we looking when it comes to what our best upgrade will be if we randomly got a spark? And as you can see, the best option for me to go is actually a ring. So here we get a guaranteed gem slot, which would replace the jeweled signet of Melandris. So even though it's a 415 and it's the highest I can get through Valor upgrades, the 418, the extra 3R level is decent, but that's really not where it brings it home. It's obviously from gaining that extra gem socket there. So that's exceptionally useful in that regard. And it's around an extra 1600 DPS there. And likewise, you can see options available for blacksmithing, so you can go, cool, I could make myself an offhand if I really wanted to, but it also costs 2 sparks, so a bit of a waste. And then likewise with the tailoring, very, very minor upgrade if I wanted to go from 415 up to 418 for that regard. So alternatively, let's say if we wanted to run the simulation again, but instead of being professions, we might look at dungeons or something like that. Now you can run all dungeons, but as you can see, it requires the Raidbot Premium. So this is an example where, again, you can go dungeon by dungeon, but if you pay them the subscription, not only will it be quicker, but there's little other features like that where you can really hone down some extras. So let's say strictly from Algathar Academy, out of my vault for the end of the dungeon, you can go the 405 specifically from 20s or 15s or whatever the case may be, but most people are going, all right, what are we really chasing out of our vault here? If I'm clearing the 20s every week, what's that dream item that gives me the most upgrade while I'm waiting? So specifically, we can go dungeon by dungeon, and again, it will obviously be way more convenient to do it out of the all dungeons option, which is only available to premium, so a bit of a sag, but you get the idea. Now, instead of doing Algathar Academy, because I'm almost guaranteeing I can already tell you it will be a weapon at 421 or the trinket, the puzzle box at 421, it would make sense, right? Let's do instead, say, Halls of Valor. So out of all the options that could drop for Halls of Valor, what 421 piece am I specifically chasing? Outside of that, we'll wait for the timer and the queue to tick down. So here's the results for the plus 20 vault option. So all 421 item levels, specifically from the loot pool of Halls of Valor. And as you can see, although they're all 421, most of these upgrades aren't upgrades, right? So they'll be an item level upgrade, but they're not going to help the DPS in any way. Prime example here, the 421 cloak, compared to my 415 cloak currently, it's a 6 item level upgrade, but the stats mean that it's actually technically a DPS loss. Sure, it's only 0.1%, but you get the idea. So another great example here is the 421 tier legs. Now the tier legs I don't need in terms of maintaining the 4-piece, right? So there's no benefit in that regard. I don't actually need to pick these, even though you assume, you know, tier piece seems good. But the current 418 legs actually have better stat optimization with a hell of a lot of mastery on there. And so again, yeah, here's an example where although item level upgrade, especially tier piece, is typically quite prominent in that regard, but it's actually a DPS loss. So very handy tool to really get a foresight into which particular dungeons will net you the best results. And as season 2 comes into play, we're running different dungeons that we haven't run in a Mythic Plus environment yet. So Neltharos, Halls of Infusion, there's probably going to be some BFA dungeons in there or whatever the case may be. And yeah, we get our opportunity then to be able to go, okay, cool. So here's a bit of future planning into which particular items that I want to be keeping an eye out on from certain dungeons. Now, we'll also take a look at the quick sim as well. This is the absolute bare minimum bones of what the simulation can actually run for us. And this is no parameters whatsoever when it comes to gear. It's literally throw in your Simcraft and just pick what parameters for the fight itself. So patchwork, dungeon slice, is it 4 bosses, is it 1 boss, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever the case may be. Once you set that, you run the sim and it will just tell you what your DPS is from that. So you're not actually changing gear or talents or anything. It's strictly just what the fight is. Given your current gear, here's what you should be doing. And it's not just for flexing or anything or throwing in guild chat and being like, oh, I'm at 90k DPS now. There's still information to be gained from this, right? So if you run this particular sim, for example, if I just did a patchwork, 1 boss, 5 minutes, and that's pretty typical of what a single target fight like Terrace will be, where you should, in all perfect circumstances, have as close to 100% uptime on the boss as you can. There's no invulnerabilities. There's no mechanics that should really make you stop too much. This is a prime example where if you're simming at 80k DPS, but you're only tangibly doing like 50k DPS on Terrace, then it gives you the information that clearly there's something not quite right here. You're either being too safe with mechanics and running well away and losing uptime on boss, or your rotation priority might be a bit out of whack, or you're not performing. Like you might immediately be knowing, shit, I should have hit this button, not the other one. So in real time, you might know what you're messing up, but it gives you a good idea of where the issues are, or if there are even any issues when it comes to patchwork fights like Terrace, which again, they're not perfectly patchwork, I understand that, but it gives you a good indication. So still information to be gained from that. So hopefully that helped you guys on, simming journey, and if wherever you are on the spectrum right now, if this helped you in any way, shape or form, then hopefully, it'll get some use out of it for you guys. Thanks very much for watching, and more videos to come for sure. Thanks. Peace.